On the 4th of November, 1914, the British expedition ship Endurance sailed southward into increasingly hostile waters under the command of Ernest Shackleton, who sought to accomplish the first land crossing of Antarctica from the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea. The ambition of the expedition reflected the final phase of what historians often call the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, a period defined not merely by geographic discovery but by a relentless test of human endurance against one of the harshest environments on Earth. Shackleton's plan was methodical yet daring. To navigate through the ice-choked waters of the Weddell Sea, land near Weddell Bay on the Antarctic continent, and then march approximately 2,900 kilometers across glaciers, mountains, and polar plateau to reach the opposite side. The crew of 28 men represented a cross-section of seamen, scientists, carpenters, navigators, and photographers, each selected for resilience and adaptability as much as for technical competence. After departing from South Georgia Island in early December 1914, the ship pressed into the pack ice, initially making cautious progress along leads in the frozen surface. By mid-January 1915, however, the encroaching sea ice tightened its grip around the hull, and on the 18th of January the vessel became firmly beset, immobilized in a shifting white expanse that stretched unbroken to the horizon. At first, the crew believed that shifting currents or seasonal change might free them, and for weeks they attempted to carve channels or exploit narrow openings in the ice, but the floes closed again with immense pressure, transforming hope into resignation. As Antarctic winter descended, bringing near-total darkness and plunging temperatures, the ice began exerting extraordinary force against the wooden hull. The groaning timbers signaled a structural battle the ship could not win, and by late October 1915, the pressure crushed the stern and opened the hull to the sea. Water seeped in relentlessly despite frantic pumping, and on the 27th of October, Shackleton gave the order to abandon ship, prioritizing human survival over the expedition's objective. The men established camp on the surrounding ice, salvaging essential provisions, 3 small lifeboats, and limited personal effects, aware that they now drifted atop a floating platform of frozen ocean with no means of communication and no certainty of rescue. Over the following weeks, they watched as the Endurance, once their secure refuge, finally succumbed to the ice and slipped beneath the surface in November 1915. An event that extinguished the geographic ambition of the mission but crystallized a new and more urgent purpose: survival. The ice floe carrying the camp drifted northward under the influence of currents and winds, gradually moving the men farther from their intended landing point and closer to the open sea. Shackleton maintained strict routines, assigning tasks to preserve morale and structure, recognizing that psychological collapse could prove as fatal as exposure. Rations were carefully measured. Seals and penguins were hunted when available, providing both meat and fuel for cooking fires rendered precarious by shifting ice. Months passed in a suspended state of uncertainty, punctuated by the groan of pressure ridges and the looming threat that the floe itself might fracture. When cracks widened and open water began appearing between sections of ice in early 1916, the party prepared to launch their lifeboats. In April 1916, after enduring nearly a year on drifting ice, the crew took to the small boats and navigated through treacherous waters filled with floating bergs and frigid spray, aiming for the nearest landmass. On the 15th of April 1916, exhausted and frostbitten, they reached the bleak shores of Elephant Island, setting foot on solid ground for the first time in 497 days. Although this achievement marked a milestone in their ordeal, the island offered little more than rock and wind. It lay outside normal shipping routes, uninhabited and devoid of permanent shelter. Shackleton quickly assessed that waiting passively would lead to eventual starvation or death from exposure, and he resolved to attempt an unprecedented open boat journey to secure rescue. Selecting 5 companions, he outfitted the strongest of the lifeboats for ocean travel and on the 24th of April 1916 set out across some of the most dangerous waters on Earth toward South Georgia Island, roughly 1,300 kilometers distant. The voyage required navigating through violent seas and unpredictable storms in a vessel scarcely suited to such a crossing. Towering waves repeatedly drenched the men, ice formed on rigging and clothing, and sleep was fragmented into brief intervals amid constant vigilance. Using sextant readings snatched during fleeting breaks in cloud cover, the navigator estimated their position, understanding that a navigational error of even a few degrees could consign them to the vast emptiness of the Southern Ocean. After more than 2 weeks at sea, they sighted South Georgia, but their landing occurred on the uninhabited southern coast, far from the whaling stations situated on the northern side. Confronted with impassable mountains and glaciers that had never been crossed, Shackleton, along with 2 companions, undertook an overland traverse without detailed maps or established routes, climbing and descending through crevassed terrain for 36 continuous hours. When they finally reached the Stromness whaling station in May 1916, their appearance was so altered by hardship that workers scarcely recognized them at first. Assistance was immediate, yet Shackleton's attention turned instantly to the 22 men still stranded on Elephant Island. Several rescue attempts failed as pack ice blocked access, underscoring the persistent volatility of Antarctic conditions. Ultimately, in August 1916, Shackleton secured passage aboard the Chilean vessel Yelcho, which succeeded in reaching Elephant Island on the 30th of August, 1916. In a moment that has since become emblematic of leadership under extreme adversity, Shackleton counted his men and confirmed that all had survived. Not a single life had been lost during nearly 2 years of exposure to conditions that had destroyed their ship and repeatedly threatened their existence. The expedition, though it failed in its original geographic aim, achieved a different and arguably greater legacy, a demonstration of disciplined leadership, mutual loyalty, and the capacity of human beings to adapt under relentless stress. Shackleton's management style emphasized optimism tempered by realism. He rotated duties, moderated conflicts before they escalated, and personally shared the most arduous tasks, ensuring that authority was rooted in example rather than command alone. The survival of the entire crew stands in stark contrast to many polar expeditions of the era, where frostbite, scurvy, starvation, and psychological breakdown frequently claimed lives. Over time, the Endurance expedition came to symbolize resilience in management studies, military academies, and explorations of crisis leadership, illustrating how morale, unity, and decisive action can mitigate even catastrophic setbacks. More than a century later, in 2022, explorers located the remarkably well-preserved wreck of the Endurance beneath approximately 3,000 meters of water in the Weddell Sea, its hull upright and largely intact in the frigid darkness, preserved by the absence of wood-boring organisms in those icy depths. The discovery provided a tangible link to the ordeal, confirming historical accounts of the crushing ice and offering visual testimony to the environment that tested the crew's resolve. Today, Shackleton's grave on South Georgia stands as a quiet memorial overlooking the sea, a reminder that while the expedition did not achieve its intended crossing of Antarctica, it accomplished something enduringly significant: the safe return of every man entrusted to its leader's care, and a narrative that continues to inform discussions of courage, responsibility, and perseverance in the face of overwhelming uncertainty.